Okay, well, good morning everybody, and welcome to this very early in the morning event. So I understand if you're feeling a bit sleepy, unlike in Iraq, people in England drink a lot of beer, and the consequences are clear. Today we're going to be talking about the Iranian attack on the KDPI centre in the Kurdish region of Iraq. There's these things. I guess what I really want to say before I introduce the speaker is the Kurds are being killed everywhere. So I've been to Turkey, and there's commemorations for dead Kurds. I've been to Syria, there's commemorations for dead Kurds. But perhaps the least known in our country is that there's 12 million Kurds, at least, living in Iran. It's a very ancient and continuous settlement of Kurds in their homeland. But as we all know, the Kurds are never at home in their home. And so the KDPI, for those who haven't heard of them, are a very distinguished and long-standing socialist party. A brief moment in 1945, where there was after the Second World War, for a couple of years, an independent Kurdish republic in Iran. But that was quickly destroyed by as the Shah asserted his grip on the nation. We know that there's a continuity of policy between the Shah and the revolution, the Islamic Revolution, neither of which allow Kurds to use their own language, neither of which allow the Kurds to have their own cultural institutions. You could say that, as in Turkey, the Kurds are simply not allowed to be Kurds within the framework of the regime, and that they're forced to speak Fars or Persian. They're not allowed to organise according to their own ethnicity or class. That essentially, as in Turkey, as was the case in Iraq, as was the case in Syria before the disintegration of the regime and the emergence of the PYD, the Kurds of Iran have no democracy, they have no freedom, and now there is a sustained effort to kill more Kurds, and there was a bomb attack on the base of the KDPI. 14 people were killed. I'm asking, is that correct? 14 people were killed while they're having their central committee, and so it's absolutely vital, really, that we raise awareness of what is happening to the Kurds in Iran, because this is significant. As ever with the Kurdish struggle, if they challenge the regime, they're considered terrorists. If they don't challenge the regime, they're just oppressed. The way forward is extremely difficult to ascertain. But what I want you to know, Mr. Azizi, is that you do have comrades and supporters in our party, that we are strong and won't falter in showing our solidarity and trying to support you. So we're very interested to hear your account of the bombing, your analysis of the political situation, and also some guidance to us on the best things that we can do to support you.
Hey. Thank you so much, Lord Glassman, and thanks a lot for Kurdish Progress. So welcome you all to this meeting, and good morning to you. Actually, what happened on September 8th, the party Central Committee had its seasonal meeting in our compound, in our headquarters in Koysancak. and we were discussing the future of Iran, the situation in Middle East, and the Kurdish case in Iranian Kurdistan. According to the bylaw of the party and the policy of the party, we have always believed in a peaceful solution to Kurdish issue in Iran. But the Islamic regime of Iran, right after the revolution, didn't listen to the demand of the Kurdish people in Iran and didn't respect the party policy in order to conduct negotiation with the Islamic regime in Iran. Following the revolution, Ayatollah Khomeini first talked about finding a peaceful solution, but after they attacked the Iranian Kurdistan and the Kurdish people had resistance against the Islamic regime, then changed their mind, and once again they talked about negotiation. According to the policy of the party, our party, Kurdistan Democratic Party, was the leading party in having negotiation with the Islamic regime in Iran. But the Islamic regime didn't believe in finding a peaceful and democratic solution to Kurdish issue. And they attacked again the Iranian Kurdistan, so they forced upon us a civil war. So the Kurdish people didn't have any choice than just defend themselves. So in this equation, there is two facts. One fact is about 10 million Kurdish people in Iranian Kurdistan, and the second fact is the Islamic regime of Iran. The Islamic regime of Iran chose the policy of terror, execution, and putting political activists in prison. Following that, they executed a lot of political activists in Iran, and then they assassinated many of our cadres and members in high level in Iraqi Kurdistan, and they continued this policy until the UN incident, while Dr. Abdulrahman Qasem, the leader of the party, was in negotiation with the Iranian delegation in Vienna. He was assassinated there. Some years later, Dr. Sadiq Sharafkandi, while he was leaving the Socialist International meeting, had a meeting with the Iranian oppositional groups for finding a common language among the Iranian political parties. He was assassinated in Mykonos. By the time when Dr. Qasimlu was assassinated in Vienna, the Austrian government escorted the Iranian terrorists direct to Tehran. There was no any justice and court in Austria. But in Mykonos, the German system of court and justice actually made a decision and announced that the Iranian high level was responsible for the assassination of Dr. Sadiq Sharafkandi. So it was the policy of the Iranian regime. During this time, we never responded the Iranian terrorist act by conducting any military act on the Iranian interest in the region. We have always chosen the policy of non-violation, negotiation, and finding a democratic solution to Kurdish issue in Iran. And as a member of Socialist International, we always expected that the Socialist International and political parties who are members of Socialist International would raise the case of Kurdish issue in international level. Why the Islamic regime of Iran attacked the headquarters of Kurdistan Democratic Party? Iran right now is facing a severe crisis, economic crisis, social crisis, almost every crisis in the country. The value of Iranian currency is down by about 70%. So it's a chaos in Iran. this regime does not have any solution, does not have any project to solve the problem inside Iran. That's why they are trying to create instability in the region, and they are trying to tell the Iranian people that there are enemies outside Iranian border which is threatening us. By sending missiles to headquarters of Kurdistan Democratic Party, they had a lot of messages to send to region. First, they attacked the party because our party is one of the leading parties who's supporting the civil movement in Iranian Kurdistan, which during last 3-4 years been a great opportunity for Iranian Kurdish people against the Islamic regime. Second, they would like to send a message to United States as a superpower in this region, to countries in this region, that the Islamic regime has the capability to send missiles if is needed to almost everywhere in Middle East. Why they just choose our party? Technically, in terms of military, they choose party because we do not have any missile to send back to Tehran, because we are not a country that can defend ourselves. We are just a party that we can just raise the voice of Kurdish people in Iran. Where was the headquarters? Headquarters is a compound near the city of Khoisanjak. This compound is a place for the different institutions of the party, youth organization, women organization, Save Children organization, and medication organization, and every other organization that are serving the women's, children's, and civilian in this compound, who died in this compound. 6 of my colleagues, while we all sitting around a table and discussing a peaceful and democratic solution to Kurdish issue in this region. Among those who been injured, there are women, there are children. They were at the yard of the compound. So the compound was a civilian headquarters for our activities. What was the reaction of the Islamic regime? On 9th of September, the Iranian Guard Corps announced that they have sent missiles to the headquarters of the party, and they admitted it and they accepted it, that they have done it. It's first time since the Iran-Iraq war that Iran using surface-to-surface missile in long range, and it was happened first to target the headquarters of the party. What was the reaction of the international community? As far as the Persian, Kurdish, Arabic, and English media is concerned, they have actually reflected this incident, and even the Iranian media talked a lot about that. In terms of political reaction, we have been witnessing many countries and many political parties showing solidarity with our party and condemn the action, this terrorist action of the Islamic regime of Iran. And even the United States representative in United Nations during the meeting of the Security Council of United Nations, Nikki Haley, condemned the Iranian attack on headquarters of Kurdistan Democratic Party. Who is who in this equation? And who are the parties in this equation, in this scenario? As I mentioned, one side is Kurdish people in Iranian Kurdistan, and other side is the Islamic regime of Iran. The Islamic regime of Iran conducted this missile attack on the headquarters of the party, but what was the reaction of Kurdish people? On September 12, the majority of Iranian Kurdish people, in widespread reaction, they shut down the shops, they stayed at home and sent a clear message to Tehran. Probably Iran will target our headquarters in future, as it has done before, but Iran can't target about 10 million Kurdish people in Iran by missiles. So missiles, terrorist action from the Iranian government against Kurdish people, against our party, is not the solution. As far as the Kurdish national, ethnic and democratic rights in Iran is not respected, our struggle will continue. Our struggle will continue. And I am sure the uprising in Iran and the crisis in Iran and probably the unity among political parties, Kurdish, non-Kurdish, regardless the different background and different political idea and religion, will become an alternative to Islamic regime of Iran. This regime can't continue as it does right now in the Middle East. A regime which is not accountable for its own people, a regime does not respect the international law, and a regime does not respect the sovereignty of Iraq as a neighbor and just sending missiles to neighboring countries. And I believe it's just a start of Iranian decision in the continuation of the internal crisis to create more crisis in Middle East, to produce this crisis to other countries. And what will happen in future if Iran not facing an international condemnation? What will happen in future if any of this missile is equipped with chemical weapons? What will happen if any of this missile will come down in Baghdad, in Saudi Arabia, in Israel, or in any country in this region? Because the Iranian regime, while it's facing this deep crisis, will do what is possible just in creating more crisis outside the Iranian border. Iran tries to send this message to its own people that almost every country in this region and every other religious and every other activities, they are against Iran. They try to create an enemy for Iranian people and tell them we have to defend ourselves. But the Islamic regime of Iran is not defending the Iranian people. They just try to survive a little bit more. They just defending themselves and try to get out of this crisis by creating instability in region and probably and possibly a war in this region. The Islamic regime is a product of war, a product of terror, a product of instability. That's why they probably will use this situation, and they will do whatever to create instability in this region. At the end, we are expecting that international community and especially the Labour Party, as one of the major parties in United Kingdom, through its friends in Socialist International, raise the Kurdish issue, especially respond the Iranian missile attack, that it will not be accepted in future. Just would like to point it out again, if any of this missile is equipped with chemical weapon, what will happen in future? That's why Iran should face a big reaction from international community. And I hope that the Labour Party will raise this issue with the British government and send this message to them and tell them that Iran is playing a dangerous game in this region. It shouldn't be without answer. Thank you so much.
So So thank you very much indeed for that. And just a couple of questions before I ask the questions from the floor. The first is, we know that Turkey has been bombing Iraq. There's the bombing of the Zagros Mountains, the bombing of Zeki Shengali in the Sinjar province. And so Iraq's sovereignty has been violated by Turkey. What was the response of the Iraqi state to this attack? What was the position of the Abadi government? Did they say anything?
Yes, actually they didn't condemn it, but if I remember it exactly, they just criticized Iran because the Iraqi government was not informed about this action. But we have to accept the reality that unfortunately there is no strong Iraqi government in Baghdad in charge. So unfortunately Iran has the possibility and the capability to present in Iraq. So according to information, one of the drones that have come to this area and have been monitoring the headquarters of the party, many says that this one belonged to Iraqi government. When we are in Iraq, we respect the Iraqi sovereignty as the Iranian Kurdish political parties. We respect the sovereignty of KRG, the Kurdish government in the region, and we expect that Iraq will actually protest the Iranian regime, because as I mentioned, our party being a party in favor of a peaceful solution, a democratic solution through negotiation with the regime in Tehran, but we have been attacked. So the attack itself and the nature of this missile attack actually should be responded by the Iraqi government anyway.
And sort of second is just a question to be informed. We, Ibrahim and I were recently in Baghdad, and there was some interesting politics going on about the Communist Party in alliance with Muqtada al-Sadr, the Sirun, and have you built any relations with the different forces in Iraq who are opposing the Iranian domination of Iraq, if you like?
We actually, as the Iranian Kurdish political party, do not interfere in the Iraqi internal affair. But we do have a very good relationship with the KRG,
sure,
and two main parties, namely KDP and PUK. So through them, we have been trying to send this message to Iraqi government that we are not creating any problem for the Iraqis and Iraqis' internal affair. But we have to accept the reality. Iraq is laying between the strategy and policy of the United States from one side, and the Iranian government from other side. We understand them, what's going on in Baghdad.
Very good. And just finally, just to find out, can you give a very brief, we know that 3 political activists were killed in Iran, publicly executed. How is the state of your organization in Iran?
If I go back to the civilian disorder in Iranian Kurdistan and civilian movement, I'm going to name 3 of them, just to saying that what's the situation for our party inside Iranian Kurdistan. During the referendum in Iraqi Kurdistan, regardless what happened to the referendum, the Iranian Kurdish people, they took the street, and actually they showed their solidarity for the case of the referendum in Iraqi Kurdistan, in widespread in many Iranian Kurdish cities. And second one was after the earthquake in the province of Kermanshah. Right from the beginning, the Kurdish people and the civil movement in Iranian Kurdistan, they actually supported the people in Kermanshah, while the Islamic regime of Iran in Tehran didn't know what was happening in this region. So the Iranian Kurdish people were well organized themselves as a reaction against the Islamic regime. And third one, as I mentioned, it was 12th of September after the attack to our headquarters, they showed their solidarity. So our party, the majority of our members and our people, they are inside Iranian Kurdistan. We have good relationship with people inside Iranian Kurdistan, and we're trying to send them this message: not be neutral, do whatever is possible against this regime in Iran. So those people who are in Iraqi Kurdistan, they are many professional members of the party, but the majority of the party members, they are inside Iranian Kurdistan. So we have tried to keep this relationship between party and people inside Iranian Kurdistan. If you go back to the history of the party, since the establishment of first Kurdish Republic in Iranian Kurdistan until now, so party have been in different situation, and we have been under attack. We have experienced a lot of casualties, but because of the grassroots inside Iranian Kurdistan, we have been trying to keep this struggle going on and going on. Great.
Okay, so please, any questions? Please, Jamie.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Jamie. I'm a local councillor in Croydon. I don't know much about your issue, but thank you for communicating really clearly. Just because no one else is asking questions just yet, I thought I'd ask your perspective on, obviously you want the Labour Party's support to influence our government. What's your impression of our leadership and our shadow ministers? Are they cooperating, are they supportive, or are they kind of sitting on the fence?
Actually, Labour Party has been our friends, and they have always respected our policy, and we do as well. What we are expecting that the United Kingdom should have a more active position in this region, because that's what we are expecting. When we talk about United Kingdom, we are talking about old and a great democracy. When people talk about United Kingdom, we are talking about a country that should have much more active role in this region. And in this regard, probably we as the Kurdistan Democratic Party, member of Socialist International, we are expecting that Labour Party will do a lot, especially after this incident in our headquarters in Kurdistan.
Thank you.
I mean, just to follow up, first of all, just to say there's very little awareness of the Kurds in Iran, generally speaking. People have some notion of that there were Kurds in Turkey. Recently with the PYD, there was some interest in the Rojava and what's going on there. But it's very difficult to get this issue into the mainstream of the debate. And one way to do that is to think of an alternative foreign policy. You know, who are your allies in the region? Who do you look to in the actual region in terms of building a strategic alliance so that we can present this as an important interest? I know that's a hard one, but that's what I struggle with.
I understand you. The main problem is that the case of human rights, the case of democracy, and the case of Kurdish people in Iran, unfortunately, have been overshadowed by the dispute of nuclear project between Iran and international community. When you talk about Iran, so the focus just is on the nuclear agreement, nuclear dispute. And Iran is trying to send this message to international community that they just have one problem. The problem is how to deal with this case. That's why the international community, international media, and the government, they are preoccupied with this issue. When this issue becomes the greater one in terms of international security and security in the region, probably almost everything will be overshadowed by this case. And second, in Turkey there is some level of media reflection of what's going on in Turkey, some level of Turkish, what I would say, election, some source of democracy, I mean in terms of what is being defined in Turkey. In Iraq, the case is different. And because of the Daesh, ISIS in Syria, so the Kurdish case become as well a case in this region. But it's not the case in Iran. So that's why I'm trying to send this message even to international community. When you talk about Iran, shouldn't focus just on the nuclear project.
Sure.
If you want to get rid of nuclear project, so the best way is to get rid of this regime. But putting pressure on this regime to be accountable for its own people and be responsible in international arena in terms of security, things like that. My understanding is, as far as this regime remains in power, so it's become always a threat to international security, to security in this region, so the case will going on. So it's good time right now, while the Islamic regime facing this big crisis, that international community will support the Iranian people, will find a solution among the Kurdish and non-Kurdish political parties, will focus on human rights and things like that. So then probably it will send a clear message to Iran. So the case is not just nuclear project. Probably if it's the case that we will witness some agreement between the United States and other European countries regarding the nuclear case, so a few years Iran will be preoccupied by this case, and probably will not be any more focus on Iran, so Iran will do whatever possible against its own people in terms of human rights and things like that.
Just to add to the dilemma, I'm just sharing with you how difficult it is. So with the emergence of Daesh and all of that, and the threat that Daesh posed to the Kurds in Syria, to the Kurds in Iraq, and the alliance to defeat Daesh. So I found myself suddenly that Iran was an enemy of this was a very difficult, so who's the biggest enemy? You say that Daesh are the biggest enemy, then naturally I found myself suddenly taking a much softer position to Iran because they were supporting the forces that were fighting Daesh. I mean, this was a very difficult one in terms of keeping the profile of the Kurds, because Saudi was supporting them, so you can't go into alliance with. I'm just showing with you the difficulties of raising this issue of the Kurds in Iran and putting pressure on the regime, because it is the case that Iran was on the right side of that particular conflict.
Yeah, first of all, in Iran, when you're talking about 10 million to 12 million Kurdish people, we have Kurds are Sunni, and we have Kurds are Shia. But if you go back to the history of the conflict between Shia and Sunni, it has become a bonus for the Islamic regime of Iran. While they're using this conflict in favor of their interests in this region, in the same time, they have good relationship with almost every terrorist organization in this region, regardless they are Shia or Sunni. Because it's the nature of the Islamic regime, as a product of the revolution, and as a product of the Iran-Iraq war, and as a product of how to use in different militant groups in this region in connection with their interests. That's why I would say that Iran had a good relationship with Daesh. And while they were fighting Daesh, and Iran always tried to keep this conflict between Shia and Sunni alive. Once the conflict is there, the different militants will be created, and once they are a reality in this region, it will pave the way for Iran to become a player in this conflict.
Please.
There's reports that obviously there are reports that there is a case being built for a war on Iran based on all the conflict information that's coming out. If we took that scenario, aside and say yes, there was a case, and for whatever reason there was war with Iran, we know that there's Iranian proxies and actors in Iraq, for example, funding Kurdish political parties, as we saw in Kirkuk. What happened as a result of the PUK siding with Iran. If there was a war with Iran, what would be the Kurdish position, and would the Kurds be used as bargaining chips, or would they be? I mean, what's the talk? What's the feeling amongst the people?
War between Iran and
correct.
Whom?
Well, Iran and obviously the Kurds, for example, KDP in Iran has allies which are with its neighbours, such as Iraq. But we know that some of those neighbours are proxies of the Iranian government. So how is that going to work if there was more uncertainty and instability in that region? What is the strategy? What is the position of the KDP Iran?
As I mentioned earlier in my speech, we are focusing on civilian movement inside Iranian Kurdistan. We are trying to send this message to Iranian people, to Iranian government, that they are facing the demand of about 10 million Kurdish people in Iran. They are not having any problem just with some political parties. It's not the case. And this party, our party, we are a product of the reality in Iranian Kurdistan. Second, as far as the conflict between Washington and Tehran is concerning, we are not part of this conflict. We are not part of this conflict. Probably they will reach an agreement. There will be we will witness an agreement between Washington and Tehran. Then what will happen to the reality in this region? So the main strategy of our party is people inside Iran and people inside Iranian Kurdistan, because uprising started about 8 months ago in Tehran and other Iranian big cities, and then 3 months later, and then 4 months later. So all this uprising, in comparison with the earlier uprising, they have been sending a clear message to Iran. They told that down with dictators and things like that. So the Iranian political establishment was surprised of this uprising. I believe that the Iranian people are trying to do what is possible against this regime. But Iran is trying to create a war. Iran is trying to, as I mentioned, to tell the Iranian peoples that the enemy is outside Iran, is waiting for this integration of Iran, that Iran will not be anymore a united Iran, things like that. Our position actually is to concentrate on civil movement inside Iran and try to convince people to face the Iranian regime, and Iranian regime should know that who's facing.
So just on that point, really quickly, let me rephrase. So that was a similar message that we had in Kirkuk as well, which was very similar in neighboring Iraq. So the question is, what's being done to prevent a potential genocide in the event of a war on the Kurdish population in Iran? That's what I'm trying to get to be precise. I mean, we stand with you in solidarity, of course, and with the Kurdish. I mean, I'm Kurdish myself. However, what I'm saying is, obviously the Kurds are being used as scapegoats, bargaining chips. We know from this missile attack, that's a clear example. And equally, it's a message of, if you uprise, this will be, what will happen. It will be a genocidal campaign against the population. What's being done to raise awareness on that and to potentially prevent that, rather than using the Kurds as a bargaining chip, scapegoat against the Iranian regime? Does that make sense where I'm coming from?
I understand you. I believe, since the Iranian regime is a terrorist government, since the Iranian regime does not respect any international law, so the international community should keep Iran under control and under observation. That's why I am saying, what will happen if any of this missile will be equipped by chemical weapon in future? So it's the best way that international community will look on Iran in another eye, actually, that Iran will do what is possible to create instability in this region. So I believe Kurds should not become a part of this conflict, this conflict, and they should defend themselves, because what happened in Kirkuk and what happened in Syria and every country, it sends this message that a united Kurdish front that could understand each other and have good cooperation with each other, probably it will be the best solution how to face this uncertainty in future.
Just to say on that, I think that that's something that we need to think about campaigning on in Turkey. I mean, with the systematic depopulation, the movement of the Kurds, what happens in Afrin, and link that the Armenians, what happened to the Armenians in 1915, and then to link that up. A final question, if nobody has questions, because in terms of Kurdish unity, the ideas of democratic confederalism that Öcalan has developed that have really caught the imagination of a lot of people here, certainly mine. And that's about a civil resistance. It's not about having an independent state. You know, it's about the Kurds having self-governing communities and living with other communities with a common good, with a democratic confederal system. How interested are you in those ideas of democratic confederalism within Iran as a means of building the organisation, but not directly challenging the regime in terms of military or military confrontation or violent confrontation?
Division of Kurdistan between 4 different countries is a reality, but the solution to this too complicated Kurdish issue will tell us that we have to concentrate on the other side of this reality. As far as this solution is concerned, we believe the best way is that every part of Kurdistan should concentrate on themselves to find a solution inside Turkey, inside Iran, inside Iraq, and inside Syria. Once the Kurdish issue being solved in those countries, probably the new ideas regarding the future of Kurds will come up. And because of the sensitivity of Kurdish people in this region that being divided between 4 countries, probably the best idea is that every section of Kurdistan, every part of Kurdistan, not sending this message to any country in this region that we are trying to establish a Kurdish state that include all different parties of Kurdistan. Unfortunately, it does not work.
No, I get that.
The case of referendum in Iraqi Kurdistan showed this reality that it's not easy to establish a Kurdish state in this region, while Tehran, Ankara, Damascus, and Baghdad are not in favor of such solution. So second, we need unity among the Kurds in every part of Kurdistan. Once we have unity in Iraqi Kurdistan, actually then we have the solution to almost every problem in this part of Kurdistan. So the lack of unity among the Kurdish party has actually been a big problem since the history of the Kurds. And we're trying to find some common language and common values among the Iranian Kurdish people. That it's time that we have a unity among us, and we establish and address an alternative for the Kurdish issue in Iran, that the Iranian government will face a strong Kurdish movement, strong Kurdish unity, then they will know whom they are facing, who is who actually. So I would accept this unity among the Kurds that being the source of problems. We probably have lost a lot of opportunities in the history because of this unity, and hope we will find a solution to this.
Okay, well, really thank you. In conclusion, just to say that when it comes to representing this issue in Parliament, I will always be there to do that and to argue the case. I have visited you in Iraq, in Kosanjak. I would love to visit the Kurds of Iran and bring a delegation to Iran so that we can raise, it's much better doing that and raising the issue, but above all to express our sorrow at the loss of your comrades and your brothers and sisters, to send from us our deepest solidarity to the people and our faithfulness moving forward in developing a political alternative to the present. So I really thank you for coming to our conference.
Thank you
and I
so
think
much.
that this is just another small step in a very long journey that we have together. Thank you.
Thank you so much.